All right, picture this. It's late November 1948. You're on the quiet shores of Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia, just as the sun is starting to dip below the horizon. But as the tide pulls back, it reveals something that's going to kick off one of the absolute strangest and most lasting mysteries of the entire 20th century. A mystery that starts with a man who, for all we know, might as well have dropped out of the sky.
And this is pretty much all the official record has to say. It's basically a blank page. For the man they found on that beach, every single basic question you could ask has the exact same answer. We don't know. I mean, this isn't a case with just a few missing puzzle pieces. The whole puzzle is missing. It's like he never existed at all until the very moment he died.
And here's where things get really weird, right from the start. The coroner was absolutely convinced the man was poisoned. The body showed all the telltale signs, like heart failure. But here's the kicker. The autopsy turned up nothing. Not a single trace of any poison they knew of. It was, for all intents and purposes, the perfect crime. A death with no weapon, no motive, and a huge, impossible question mark hanging over it.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this thing, we have to go right back to the beginning. Back to that beach, November 30th, 1948. We need to look at the only piece of solid evidence the police actually had. The man himself.
You know, the scene itself was just eerie. He was found just propped up against the seawall, his head resting back. He looks like he could have just fallen asleep watching the ocean. There were no signs of a fight. His clothes were all neat. It was this totally peaceful image that was hiding a very, very violent secret. So what did police have to go on? Well, a picture starts to form. He's tall, about 5'11", somewhere in his 40s, and he was in fantastic physical shape, like an athlete. The details are so specific, right? Gray eyes, ginger hair just starting to go gray at the temples. It's like we're getting these first few brushstrokes in a portrait of a man who is, in every other way, a complete ghost. And then there are his hands. This is a huge clue. They were soft, perfectly clean, with zero calluses. You know, the kind of wear and tear you'd get from working with your hands. So what does that tell you? This guy wasn't digging ditches. He was probably a professional, someone who worked in an office, maybe. It just doesn't fit the picture of some random guy found on a beach. It just makes you wonder, what was he doing there? Okay, now this is a detail you're going to want to file away for later. It's super specific and really unusual. The man was missing 18 teeth, and 2 of them, his incisors, were probably missing from birth because of a really rare genetic condition. I mean, a detail that unique should have been a slam dunk for identifying him through dental records. But nope, it led absolutely nowhere. Just remember that detail. It becomes critically important. It's clear someone went to a lot of trouble to make this man a ghost. And it wasn't just his identity, it was his clothes, too. Every single label, from his suit, his shirt, even his tie, all of it had been carefully, meticulously snipped off. Now, that is not an accident. That is a deliberate act of erasure. So the question is, who was so desperate to make this man anonymous? Was it him? Or was it his killer, methodically wiping away every last clue to who he was? So for months, this case was completely stalled, a total dead end. But then, during a new search of the man's clothes, an investigator felt something. Tucked away in a tiny, hidden fob pocket that had been sewn inside the man's trousers was a tightly rolled up piece of paper. A clue so small they almost missed it. But it was about to unlock a whole new and, frankly, much stranger chapter of this story. And on this little scrap of paper, just 2 words, Taman Shud. It's a Persian phrase and it means it is ended or it is finished. The police quickly figured out that these are the very last words in a book of poems called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. It's a book all about living life to the fullest before the end comes. So what was this? A poetic suicide note, or was it some kind of final cryptic taunt from a killer? This discovery sent the police on a manhunt, but not for a person, for a book. A very specific, very rare edition. They put out a public appeal, and this is where the story takes a turn straight out of a movie. A guy comes forward and says that on the very night the Somerton man died, he found this exact book just tossed into the backseat of his unlocked car. When the police looked at it, the last page was torn. And that torn piece? It was a perfect 100% match to the scrap in the dead man's pocket. You can't make this stuff up. But of course, it wasn't just a book. When they examined the back cover, they found more. Faintly penciled in were an unlisted phone number, a woman's name, Justin and something else. 5 lines of capital letters that looked for all the world like some kind of unbreakable code. Just like that, the case wasn't cold anymore. It had just cracked wide open. So that phone number was the first real, solid lead in this whole investigation. It was the thread they could finally pull on, and it led them away from the anonymous body on the beach and straight toward living, breathing people who might just hold the key to this entire mystery. And what a group of people they found. Let's meet the players. First, you've got Justin, a local nurse. It's her number in the book. Then there's Prosper Thompson, the man she was living with, who, as it turns out, had a history of some shady business, like forging documents. And then, get this, Alfred Boxall, an Army intelligence officer. Justin admitted she'd given him a copy of the Rubaiyat just a year before. So you have a nurse, a forger, and a spy, all tangled up with this one strange book. Naturally, all eyes turn to Justin. She's adamant. Nope, never seen him before in my life. But when the police showed her a plaster cast they'd made of the man's face and chest, well, her reaction told a very different story. The official report says she was so shocked, she looked like she was about to faint, and she refused to even look at it a second time. I mean, come on, that is not how you react to a stranger. That's the reaction of someone who is hiding a massive secret.
So let's just recap for a second. We've got a man who can't be identified, killed by a poison that can't be traced, carrying a code that can't be broken, and now he's linked to an Army intelligence officer. The police started to think, maybe this is bigger than a simple murder. And to understand why, you have to remember what was going on in the world at this time. The Somerton man died right at the dawn of the Cold War. Tensions between the West and the Soviet Union were through the roof, and Australia, being a major U.S. ally, was on constant high alert for communist spies. In that kind of paranoid atmosphere, when an unidentified foreigner shows up dead under such bizarre circumstances, well, you can imagine where everyone's mind went. Espionage. And that whole spy theory got a lot stronger when they finally found his suitcase left behind at the local train station. I mean, sure, some of the contents were normal, pajamas, a razor, but just like the clothes he was wearing, other items had their labels snipped out. And then there were the tools, a stencil brush, a sheathed knife, a pair of sharpened scissors. So you have to ask yourself, are those the belongings of a normal traveler? Or is that the toolkit of a spy, someone who might need to forge documents or create a new identity at a moment's notice?
Now, you'd think this case couldn't possibly get any stranger, but it does. As investigators dug deeper, they found at least 2 other mysterious deaths from just a few years earlier that had some deeply, deeply unsettling things in common with this case. This is where a real shiver goes down your spine. In 1945, a man named Joseph Marshall dies from poisoning with a copy of the Rubaiyat left on his chest. A key witness in that case? She turns up dead just 13 days later. Now, fast forward 3 years, and here's our Somerton man. Another suspected poisoning. Another link to the exact same book of poetry. I mean, at what point does coincidence stop being a coincidence? Is this a signature? A calling card? Left behind by a very particular kind of killer? For years, decades even, the case file just gathered dust. The man was never identified. The story was a dead end. But then, a voice from the very center of this whole web emerged with new information. Justin's daughter. And what she had to say was an absolute bombshell. Justin's daughter Kate came forward and said her mother had lied to the police. She said her mom didn't just know the Somerton man. She was a communist sympathizer who could speak Russian. But then came the knockout punch. Remember that weird dental defect we talked about? That incredibly rare genetic trait of having 2 missing incisors? Well, Kate's brother had it too. Suddenly, you have a direct line connecting a secret love affair, Cold War politics, and the mystery man on the beach. So it seems like this could finally solve everything, right? A motive, an identity, the whole shebang. But here comes the single most frustrating part of this entire story. The most important pieces of evidence, the suitcase and, most critically, that copy of the Rubaiyat with the code inside, they were lost or destroyed by the authorities somewhere along the way. The physical keys that could have unlocked this whole mystery are just gone. Forever.
And that leaves us with this one. Chilling thought from Kate Thompson herself, the woman who grew up in the shadow of the secret. So who was the Somerton man? A jilted lover? A heartbroken father? Or was he a spy, silenced by a foreign power? His identity scrubbed away not just by his killer, but by forces who made sure this story would stay exactly what it is today, a perfect, unfinished mystery. Taman Shud.